Hey everyone, welcome back to my kitchen. Today we are going to Disneyland. Every time we visit Walt's original park, Steve and I always make a point to grab a bite at Carnation Cafe. Whether you're there for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, this little cafe's menu boasts a wide variety of classic comfort food, including Mickey waffles, burgers and shakes, fried chicken, and of course, what we're making today, the loaded baked potato soup. This is probably one of my favorite soups on Disney property. A small serving makes an excellent starter, but if you prefer a large bowl paired with a glass of Merlot can make a delightful entree. And it only takes one bite to make you feel like you're right there on Main Street, USA. Now this recipe comes from the delicious Disney cookbook. This is one of my favorites of the Disney cookbooks. It is filled with really great recipes, beautiful artwork. It almost looks like a coffee table book. As you can see, it's a little different in size and style than the subsequent cookbooks that would come out. If you can get a copy of this, I highly recommend it. Now, before we get started, I do want to mention that this recipe requires a considerable amount of chopping. If you have a food processor, I highly recommend using one. I'm going to be using this food processor here, along with a 12mm dicing kit. Not only will this be a huge time saver, but we're going to get those really precise cuts and that uniformity that will ensure our potatoes and our vegetables all cook evenly. And I find the 12mm makes for a nice size for soup vegetables, giving us a really nice bite. For this recipe, you'll need 1 pound of bacon, 1 medium yellow onion, 1 large carrot, 3/4 of a cup of diced celery, 4 large russet potatoes, 4 medium red potatoes, 1/4 of a cup of all-purpose flour, 2 cups of chicken stock, and 4 cups of heavy cream. All right, the first thing we want to do to get started is to take our pound of bacon and we're going to give this a rough chop. I'm going to do this in 2 batches, otherwise it gets a little thick and it's a little harder to cut. As you can see, you can interpret rough chop however you'd like. I like these strips of bacon. Remember, it will shrink down as we cook. I'll go ahead and transfer my roughly chopped bacon to this plate where we can just set it to the side. As you can see, this is a lot of bacon, but we are going to be making a big soup, and also we're going to reserve half of it for topping. All right, now when it comes to measuring our flour, there's something I want to show you. Flour is a very critical component to this soup. It's going to act as our thickening agent, but there is a proper way to measure it out. Now the first thing I want to do, my flour has been sitting for a few days. So what I want to do is I want to take this butter knife and I just want to kind of wake it up, stir it up, just to kind of loosen it up. Now I'm going to take my measuring cup. This recipe calls for 1/4 of a cup of all-purpose flour. So I'm going to just gently scoop and level off the excess. That's it. I'm going to go ahead and add it to my little bowl here to set aside. But you really want to resist the urge to pack, or you definitely don't want to pack it in. You don't want to do this. No. We're going to take 1 large carrot and let's go ahead and peel this. I'm going to go ahead and take my tips off, and we'll go ahead and set that to the side. Now we'll take our celery. Now I'm going to run the celery through the food processor first, because whereas the cookbook tells us they want 1 carrot, 4 potatoes, they give us the already diced measurement for celery. So let's go ahead and take our celery stalks and give them a nice wash. To prepare my celery, I like to chop off the tips, and then I like to use the green parts only. So I'm going to go ahead and insert my celery into the chute. What I like about this food processor, it comes with this little handy dandy tool, and you can just push it through and get those extra bits. As you can see, we got perfect 3/4 a cup from this. This was 6 celery stalks. You could probably just do 5. Now we'll go ahead and add our large carrot. And at this point, I can go ahead and just leave the carrot in there. I'm going to add the onion and then I'll empty it. I'm just going to take this top off here, cut down the center, and we just tear this paper right off. And now that we have our onions prepared, we can feed this right through the chute of our food processor. Now that we have our carrot and our medium onion diced, we can go ahead and put that into a small bowl. And to that we can add our 3/4 cup of diced celery. And at this point we can set this to the side. Now I'm gonna go ahead and get my potatoes ready. Now this recipe asks us to peel the potatoes. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. If you'd like to keep the potato skins on, you can. Just make sure you scrub them very well. So with our potatoes peeled and ready to go, I'm gonna go ahead and just cut them a little bit down to size so they can fit through the chute of the food processor. All right, so that's all our potatoes. Let's go ahead and transfer that to a bowl. As you can see, I really filled my food processor, probably more than I really should. But if you have a smaller food processor, just make sure you do this in batches. We'll go ahead and take the potatoes and transfer it to a bowl. Look at those cuts, it's so perfect. Each bite is gonna be exactly the same size. And as you can see, I got a few little pieces of the carrots and celery. That's fine, it's not a big deal. As you can see, our mise en place is complete. We have all of our ingredients peeled, chopped, diced, and now we can head over to the stove and start cooking. Now the first thing you want to do is grab an appropriate size stock pot. The recipe calls for either a 6 or 8 quart. I am using an 8 quart stock pot here. And we're gonna put this over medium-high heat and go ahead and fry our bacon. And we're gonna put all of our bacon in there. You probably noticed I didn't start with any cooking fat. Instead, I just added the bacon directly to the pan because we're actually going to use the bacon fat that will render out. You want to make sure you stir your bacon fairly regularly. Even though I'm using a fairly wide stock pot, some of that bacon will be on top of one another and won't be cooking properly. So make sure you're stirring. One thing I like to do when I'm cooking is I like to create a little assembly line of all my ingredients. So as you can see, up next, we'll be cooking our vegetables, and then we'll be moving to our potatoes, a little bit of flour, which is gonna act as our thickening agent, followed by some chicken stock, and then lastly, our heavy cream. All right, I'm really liking how this bacon has crisped up. So I'm gonna go ahead and place this spoon off to the side, and I'm gonna grab my slotted spoon, and I'm gonna start taking my bacon and placing it on a paper towel lined plate. But I wanna use the slotted spoon because I wanna keep all that bacon fat in our pot because that's what we're gonna use to cook our vegetables in. So as you can imagine, this is going to be a very delectable soup. And now to this bacon fat, we're gonna go ahead and add our vegetables. Again, this is 1 large carrot, 1 medium yellow onion, and 3/4 a cup of diced celery. And we're gonna stir fairly regularly, and you're gonna cook until your vegetables are tender and your onion is translucent. So that'll be about 3 to 4 minutes. So I think at this point, we're gonna go ahead and add our potatoes. Stirring to incorporate all of our sauteed veggies and the bacon fat. We're only gonna cook these potatoes here at this step for about 4 minutes. So not a terribly long time, but they will soften once we start adding our liquids and bring this soup to a simmer. Now after our 4 minutes, we're gonna go ahead and reduce the heat to low. And I hate to break it to you, but this is where you're gonna get a really good arm workout. We're gonna go ahead and add our flour. Again, that is 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. And once we do that, we're gonna stir constantly for about 5 to 7 minutes. Now this step is critical because we wanna incorporate all that flour while continuing to cook our potatoes and our vegetables, but we don't want the flour to burn. All right, so I've been stirring for a little over 6 minutes, and I really like the consistency. I like how it's coming out. It's smelling really good. I'm gonna go ahead now and bring the heat back up to medium high, and we're gonna add our chicken stock and half of our bacon. Again, this is 2 cups of chicken stock. You can absolutely use vegetable stock if you'd prefer. And then we're gonna go ahead and add half of our bacon. I'm just gonna eyeball it here. At this point, I'm gonna go ahead and season with some salt and pepper. Now, as you can see, I do have a fairly high tolerance for salt, but this is a very large pot of potatoes. Now, as you can see, we're starting to see a few little bubbles come to the top. At that point, we're gonna wanna go ahead and lower our heat to maintain that gentle simmer, and we're gonna leave this here for about 25 minutes. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, there really isn't that much liquid in here, and there's not. But later on in the recipe, we will have the ability to adjust the thickness by adding additional water or chicken stock, but we're gonna do that after we add our cream. While the soup is simmering, now would be a great time to get together any garnishes you might want to have. The cookbook recommends shredded cheddar cheese, Monterey Jack, chopped chives, sour cream, and don't forget our bacon bits. This is looking really good. I'm actually gonna go ahead and give it a little taste. It's very important to make sure you are tasting as you cook. A lot of people forget to do that, and it's very, very important. It tastes really good, but more importantly, I can tell my potatoes are nicely cooked. They're soft with just a tiny little bit of a bite. So I think we're ready to move on. Now, this next step, pay attention. You're gonna wanna go ahead and take a potato masher and just do a few firm mashes. You don't wanna do too much. The very first time I made this soup, I went a little heavy-handed on the mashing and I lost my soup consistency and it went right to mashed potatoes. And that's it. As you saw, I did 4 firm mashes, and that's enough. Like I said, it's very easy to get tempted to continue mashing, but don't do that. This is a soup. To this, we're gonna go ahead and add our 4 cups of heavy cream. We'll go ahead and give this a nice stir to incorporate. Our stock pot is still on medium-high heat. I'm gonna turn that down to medium and then bring this to a simmer where once we reach that simmer, we're gonna let it go for about 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, your soup should have a nice creamy consistency. If you're not happy with your soup's consistency, it's at this point you can add more stock or water. But as you can see, this looks excellent. I'm gonna go ahead and try this out. That is very, very good. I'm actually just gonna add a little bit of salt and pepper, and I think we're good to go. All right, the soup looks excellent. So let's go ahead and dish it up. I'm gonna grab my ladle here. As you can see, this has a beautiful, very creamy, velvety consistency. It's exactly what we're going for. So let's go ahead and start with a little bit of shredded cheddar cheese. Put that right there. And we'll do a little bit of Monterey Jack. Let's add some bacon bits. And a good dollop of sour cream. And then a light sprinkling of fresh chives. And there you have the loaded baked potato soup from Carnation Cafe. One quick thing I wanted to point out is that this cookbook suggests a wine pairing for this soup, and that is a Merlot from Sonoma County. All right, this looks delicious. I'm very excited to try this. That is so delicious. It's so creamy and velvety. It's got such good flavor. I think we cooked our potatoes absolutely perfectly. It's got the perfect bite, savory and delicious. Like I said, it only takes 1 spoonful to make you feel like you're back in Disneyland. So are you gonna try your hand at the loaded baked potato soup? Let us know in the comments below. Give us a thumbs up if you like this video, and don't forget to subscribe. And from our magic family to yours, enjoy.